Hello friends, today we discuss our topic that is distributed queue dual bus. We also call this as the DQDB. Now, about the distributed queue dual bus, it is data link layer communication protocol for MAN, that is Metropolitan Area Network. DQDB is an IEEE 802.6 standard. Well, the DQDB is designed basically for both voice and video. As the DQDB, we use the topology that is dual bus, and dual bus contain two unidirectional logical buses. Well, the DQDB can extend up to 30 miles at 34 to 55 Mbps. Mbps stands for megabits. There is also the important thing that is DQDB is independent of physical size of network. Now to understand the DQDB, that is distributed queue dual bus, let us take the example of a diagram. Let us suppose we are having a bus A that works in the forward direction. Now this bus A only works in the forward direction. And suppose we are having one more bus, that is bus B, which only works in the backward direction. Now let us suppose we are having a 5 system that are in sequence order, which are inside between these two buses A and B. So we will start our system with the system number 1 as C1. We are going to provide the name to the first system as C1. Similarly, we are having 4 more systems with the name as C2, C3, C4 and C5. Now we are having the 2 buses, that is the unidirectional buses. The bus A is a unidirection in the forward. Again we are having the bus 2 or the bus B, that is unidirectional in the backward direction. The main tricky part in the DQDB is to connect these 2 unidirectional buses with the 5 computers. So if you want that, for example, the bus A start the communication, in that case, how to send the data to C1, C2, C3 and C4 or C5? So that will be in the forward direction. So the connection will be like that. From A, if we start the data goes to the C1 or to the C2, maybe to the C3, C4 or C5. There will indicate the direction of data transfer. But if I am talking about the data transfer via the bus A, then if our C1 wants to send data to the bus, it will be in the direction of C1 to the bus, C2 to bus, C3 to bus, then C4 to the bus A. Similarly for C5 to bus A. But what if the data is transferred in the backward direction, or B wants to communicate? If B starts the communication, it will send the data to C5, arrow indicates the direction, to C4, bus B to C3, to C2 and C1. But now if I say the C5 wants to communicate via bus B, then we'll send the data to bus B, from C4 to bus B and C3 to bus B, similarly for C2 and C1. So we can see that for the backward direction we are using the bus B and the forward direction we are using the bus A. Now the main part, and the most important part in the DQDB is that each bus supposes the traffic only in single direction, maybe in the forward direction or maybe in backward direction, and each bus connects to the station directly through input and output ports. So you can see that for the system number 1, the incoming arrow is the input port and the arrow going outside is the output port. And similarly for the same as the input and output port for C2, C3, C4 and C5. Now we are having the next topic in the DQDB, that is called the upstream and the downstream. If I am talking about the bus A, now under the DQDB we are having the next part, that is the upstream and downstream. We can also provide the alias form to the upstream as UP and the downstream as DS. Now come the part for the explanation. For example, the bus A is first configured. Now we can also provide the alias name to the upstream as the US and the downstream as DS. Or let us suppose the bus A is first configured. So if the bus A is first configured, well, that means the data will be transferred in the forward direction. Now in that case the system number 1, that is C1 and system number 2, that is C2. These are the upstream, that is US. They are the upstream with respect to system number 3, that is C3. Now, if I am talking about the system number 4, that is C4, and the system number 5, that is C5, they are at downstream, but with respect to the system number 3, that is C3. So we can say that according to the bus A and with respect to the system number C3, C1 and C2 are the upstream and C4 and the C5 are downstream. So now the station number 1, that is C1, has no upstream station, and with respect to the system number 1, C2, C3, C4 and C5 all are the downstream. So C1 is having 4 downstream stations. Now if I am talking about the station number 5, that is C5, there is no more downstream station because system number 5 is the last system in the complete bus A. And obviously before system number 5 we are having 4 upstream stations. So we have the 4 upstream stations before C5. So these 4 upstream stations are C1, C2, C3 and C4, which are before the C5. Now let us suppose the bus B is configured. As the bus B is configured, the data will be transferred in the backward direction. If I am talking about the system number C1 and C2, they are at the downstream with respect to the system number C3. If we talk about the system number C4 and C5, they are at the upstream with respect to system number C3. So that means if we are using the bus A, the C1 will act as the upstream, otherwise we are using the bus B, it will act as the downstream. Similarly, as before the C1, computer number 1, we are having no more downstream and we are having 4 upstream stations, that is C2, C3, C4 and C5. And if we talk about the C5, system number C5 or the station C5, we are having no more upstream with respect to the bus B, but we have 4 downstream, that is C1, C2, C3 and C4 with respect to the C5. So that is all about the upstream and downstream. They vary according to the bus is configured. Now we'll discuss about the working of DQDB. Now under the working of DQDB, head and generate fixed size cell in both directions, and to transmit, a host must know whether the destination is the right or the left. If it is the right, the host must send a left bus, and if at the left, the host must send a right bus. To understand this, let us say we are having the system, that is system number C1 and system C3, and they want to communicate with each other. Let us say C1 is the sender, S stands for sender, and C3 is the receiver, R stands for receiver. So data will be transferred in the direction from C1 to the bus A with the help of that particular arrow. The data will be transferred to the bus A. Bus A will forward the data and that will be passed to C3. So that means C1 must aware about the C3, that is, it is in the right direction to the C1. So I have to use bus A. Now we are going to take one more example to understand about the right and left. We have discussed about the right because the C3 was the right to the C1. Let us suppose we are having one more computer, that is the C5, and we have one more system, that is C2. At this time the C5 is the sender, S stands for sender, and the C2 is receiver, R stands for the receiver. Now C5 will send the data with the help of these particular arrows. The data will be transferred to the bus B and bus B will forward the data. So now that data is forwarded to the particular attachment bus to the C2, and C2 will receive the data via bus B. So you can see that the bus A is basically used in the forward direction and bus B is used for the backward direction. So that is all about the thing. So C5 must aware that whether C2 is at the left or right. So that means if I have to use the bus A or B, the bus A and B will be the decision of the system, and system decision will be based upon the direction, that is the forward or the backward. Well, the distributed queue is used to make sure that cells are transmitted on first come, first served basis. We also call this as the FCFS. So we can say that the cells are transmitted in FCFS basis. So the FCFS, that is first come first served, indicates that the packet or the cell which arrives firstly will be processed at the first and given the higher priority. Now each node is aware of the relative position of all the nodes. That means the C1, C2 and C3. Every system are aware about all their neighbors. That means C2 is aware about the C1 and C3. Similarly, C2 for C1, C3, C3 for C2, C4. Then C4 is aware about C3 and C5 and about same for the rest of the system. So that is all about the distributed queue dual bus, in which we are having two unidirectional buses and they are configured differently in the backward and the forward direction. So that's all about DQDB. Thank you.